Well, this building was built in '64, I believe, and our hope was that it would be a ministry not just for students, but for the university, for the whole community, for faculty. So we had a lot of events here, including lectures. We had a great debate between university faculty and Tom Altizer, who advocated the death of God. We had the first jazz worship service here with UNC Jazz Lab Band. We had lectures by leading theologians. We had Paul Tillich here. We had Marcus Barth, the son of Karl Barth. We had Richard Niebuhr from Harvard here. We had a great reception for W.H. Auden, the poet, who was upstairs in the lounge in his bedroom slippers sipping a cup of straight gin. It was quite an occasion. But the building was used largely by the whole university community, by music groups that performed in the coffee shop. It was a great time, and the building was truly a servant of the university.
So there are many things that we could say about this building, all the way from the pigeons that used to nest on the cross in the dry garden space out back, the residents and their pranks of underwear on the arms of the angel over the chapel, the constant care that this facility required during my period of time. As a matter of fact, when things began to break down, I spent a great deal of my life in ministry, unfortunately, looking after the air conditioner or the roof or any of a number of other kinds of things that occurred here. What happened during the 50s, beginning in the late 40s and early 50s, there grew to be a conflict between, in the community at large. It centered around the civil rights movement. It was pushed by the fact that the 1954 decision by the Supreme Court that integrated schools. And it was it had a very divided reception in the community and in the churches as well. And it turned out that Wesley Foundation and the local church became at odds frequently over that kind of issue. So there was a need for the students to have their own voice, and they needed to be, in some ways, separate from the local church. They need to express themselves, as one person said, separately and distinctly. And so that began the sort of movement to have a separate facility. Prior to that time, even back as early as the 1925, there had been student work going on here. And the campus ministers began to be appointed in the late 40s and continued on up through the 50s. But in the 60s, it became necessary to separate and build a separate facility. And so this space was, the lot was built, and an old house stood here, and then this facility was put up by the two conferences. To look at it through the eyes of students, though, it became, in some respects, their place, and here they formed their church, and separate from the local churches, and a place where they could experiment with what they understood church to be. And one of the things that it became clear to me is that that the issue of justice especially extended beyond just the racial issue, that it became a larger issue of impoverishment, both for black and white people, and it wasn't just a national issue, but an international issue. So one of the happy things that happened for us in some ways is that we developed a style of doing work mission teams and did our very first one to Costa Rica. And it was so successful and made such a strong impact on students that I did 16 of those following that, and it was quite an enterprise. And there are many, many stories to be told of that.
I think there are 3 ways in which the building shaped the ministry when I was here serving as campus minister. The first one, I think, probably has resonated throughout the history of the building, and that is serving as a home away from home for students. To have a space, a sacred space that is, maybe we could best say it as being of the church but not in the church, granted students an opportunity to explore the parameters of their faith, the depth of their faith, to ask really difficult questions that they didn't feel comfortable asking in the context of a more traditional setting. And that's no small thing, because I think that that's where the deep spiritual growth really comes from and takes root and allows students to appropriate their own faith. There were 2 things that we did that I think helped to solidify that as a home away from home. One was to become a true Eucharistic community. We had Eucharist a lot, every Sunday night, and as part of the residential community, regular meetings, and then every Wednesday or Thursday night. We shifted our regular weeknight meeting night from Wednesday to Thursday, but when we did that, we had communion every week just prior to dinner. So there was a real sense, I think, for most students that that was part of who we were, being a Eucharistic community. The other thing that was very significant was the development of an intentional residency, which we have had over the course of time, but it's taken on various iterations. In my tenure, we developed a program called Vocation House and received a couple of grants from the General Board of Discipleship in order to resource that for students who were really interested in exploring vocation. After a couple of years, it was apparent that the word vocation was scary to students. They didn't want to live here because it had vocation in the name. So we sort of dropped that, but we continued to be intentional in the community life and the way in which they lived together, developing covenants and exploring particular avenues of faith and service through those communities. So I think that, you know, that was the blessing of the building, the home away from home that it offered to students, many of whom didn't necessarily find a sense of community on campus, but they found it here. And that will be missed. Will definitely be missed.
So as I listen to the former campus ministers, I am blessed beyond belief at the amazing things that I have inherited as a part of the ministry that we do here at Wesley. I think about Bob's message of being a bridge, being a ministry that reaches out to the university, that engages and helps students connect through community. I think about Manuel and his efforts to create a space where we advocate for social justice, where racial reconciliation happens. During his time here, they began service trips, and I know that those have impacted the lives of all the students who have participated in them, and for that I am truly grateful. And then Jan, who implemented this weekly Eucharist multiple times a week, to me has been such a blessing to see students begin to live more fully into this faith, to live a life in which they understand what it means when we say that we're taken, that we're blessed, and that we're broken and given, in the same way that we take, bless, break, and give the elements of bread and wine each week. If I think about the way that this building has shaped the ministry to students while I've been here, I would say that the most important thing that it has offered us is a place to dream big about who God is calling us to be as Christians, as disciples of Christ, I've seen this space really offer us the place that we need to really vision and discern where the Holy Spirit is leading us. I'll never forget up in my office the meeting after meetings after meetings that Sarah Beth, David, Josh, and I would have where we were praying about the Wesley community. We could sense that something big was on the horizon for us. Over and over again we named that we felt God was calling us to something bigger than we could dream of, something that we could not imagine at this moment, but we just felt like there was something out there for us. Shortly after that time, I was in the chapel praying, and I came across a verse from Isaiah 43 in which the prophet says, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. It springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the desert." When I read that verse, I felt like it really did put into words the way that we felt about this ministry, that something new was springing up in us, that God was calling us to something bigger, something that could not be held within the walls of a building. What an amazing gift it has been for us to have this space for 49 years. I think about all the history that is in this space, in this very chapel where we sit tonight. I think about the students that have prayed in this space, the music that has been sung. I think about the people who've been baptized and those who've been married. All the precious memories that have been welcomed and been a part of this space. And I'm excited for the future because I feel like this is just the beginning of making memories.